Before you begin, you need to make sure that your lining piece or your backing to the quilt is square. And oftentimes their customer will seam it or and leave an extra part on one half of it. So you need to make sure that that is cut off. If you get a piece like this that's not square, you can go to your table, or even if you have you don't have another table but you have a quilting machine, put your rotary board on the back of that, and then you can line that up, and we'll just take a nice cut across there and check that with the other end to make sure that we have our lining that's going to be square. I found it's really important for me to lay the quilt out, the lining, the top, and the batting before I actually load it on the machine to make sure that I have everything in the right order, and I'll find the centers and do my pinning. So here's my lining. Now imagine if this was a big king size quilt, some of this lining would be hanging over the edge of the table. Everybody has room to do this because you have a quilting machine, so you don't need a big table to do this. Then I will take my top, fold it in half as well, and lay it on top of the lining, and I will usually match one end of it like this. Then I can visually see that I have extra lining on the side and I have extra lining at the end of the quilt. This is also the time that you want to look at this and make sure that you have, if you have a one-way pattern on the top, now this is just a solid piece so I don't have to worry about that, but if I had a one-way heart and I had hearts on the back, I'd want to make sure that I had laid them out correctly the same direction. So when I got finished, I wouldn't have hearts on the back going upside down. Now I will take my top to the center, and I'm weaving a pin in and out because I don't want that pin to come out as I'm flipping these fabrics around. And I'll do the same thing with the lining on this end. Right there, weaving that pin in and out. I don't use a safety pin because I'm going to use this pin as my first pin, so then I don't have to worry about where to put that safety pin. And again, weave our pin in and out, and on this end of the lining. Now, if you are at all worried about your batting, if perhaps a customer has provided it for you and you're not sure if it will fit, then you could also lay that batting out and make sure that that's correct. Now I'm going to move the lining out of the way. It's got pins on both sides, and I'm going to load the top first. And the reason that I do that is because I let the table handle the bulk of the quilt. You never have to stand over here with a big top and wonder what you're doing with it. Now remember, when we squared off the lining, we did not square up the top. If you have a piece top, you cannot square off that top. You can't cut off borders or square them up. We can deal with the top if it's not square. So lay out your top like this, so it's in the middle of your table and there's plenty of hanging down in front. Most of that is going to be on the back of the quilting machine. The most common size of quilt that you'll be doing will be a queen size, so you're dealing with quite a bit of bulk. Now we'll go around to the front of the machine. We're going to come around to the side to our rollers, and we're going to let our lining canvas down to about the floor. This is a loading position. It's straight up and down for the top roller. We're going to we'll lift up the little lever and let that top roller down about halfway. Then as I come over here, I can lift this canvas up and over. I don't want too much of this canvas because I'll be leaning over like this to pin, and we never want to lean over. We've got to keep our back straight and stand up straight. So I can take this clamp and just clamp the end of that canvas, and I'll flip it up over this bar. Now I don't clamp the other end because if I do, I just have to unclamp it, and it should stay up there for me like this. Then I just bring the edge of this top over to the edge of the canvas. I make a sandwich like that, just the two of them together, and then I pin so that my pin goes in on the canvas side, and I'm going to do what I call a pin base. I just kind of do a 1-to-1 ratio over here and hold it as I put my pin in. Notice that the pins are less than 1/4 of an inch down from the top of the canvas, and I'm also able to see just a tip of the top curling around the edge of that canvas. So I continue to do my pin baste out to the end like this, And if this is your top and it isn't square, don't worry about it, because when we get down to that point, we will be unpinning it anyway. Now as I work my way back, I'm going to fill these pins in tip to point. And that means that I can't see any canvas in between them. You don't have to overpin, but you do have to pin close enough so that you have solid pinning in there. There we go. Once we have that solidly pinned, we're going to go down to the end and we're going to roll this top up. So we'll come down to the end and we'll roll the top. We have our little lever down on the teeth, and we roll it until it just falls off of our pickup roller. Then we'll come over on this side and we'll pull it over like this, and we can just let it hang down, or if you prefer, you can just lay it over your roller like that. Now we're ready to bring up our lining canvas. And this is going to come up between the two bars here, between your belly bar and your pivot bar. It's going to come up through there and over. And again, I will clamp this end. Now I'll go lay my back over the back of the pickup bar. This time I'll lay this piece wrong side up. So this is our lining, or our backing, whichever you call it, and I'm laying it over the back of the pickup bar wrong side up. Now the other piece was our top and we laid it right side up. So this is wrong side up. So once that's nice and smooth over here, then I'll come around to this side. There's my pin, and that will be my first pin. So I just bring them together like that, take the pin, and begin the pinning process exactly as I did on the front piece. And one more pin. There we go. Now we're going to roll up our lining, and you can see how well this bar handles that fabric for us. It handles it so well that we don't have to worry about smoothing it on the roller if we do it this way. So we'll come down to the end to our lining roller, and if you hear the click, you're rolling it the right direction, because you can roll it backwards. So you have your little lever over on the little teeth, and if you hear that clicking, that means you're rolling it the right way. So we roll it. Let's keep our canvases straight. Sometimes if we have a smaller quilt like this, the canvases on the edge can get really crumpled under, so make sure that those are nice and straight. A bigger quilt, you won't have any problem. It just rolls up nice and smooth. There we go. And that's far enough. I want this to be touching on the table behind. I want this edge of the lining to be down on the table right here, because then I can just bring this pickup canvas, this is called the pickup roller, I'll just bring it down to the edge of that, just release it a little bit more there, there we go, and I'm ready to pin this. Now remember, this is our lining that we're pinning on here. We're not going to pin our top onto this at all. And there's my first pin. I just again make that sandwich like that. Now here you have a choice. You can either pin your batting on with this, or you can add it afterwards. I like to just pin it on at the same time and get it over with, but that's your choice, whichever you prefer to do. Here's my batting, and it's nice and long. I think it's the width of the fabric, which was 96, but that's okay. You don't have to pre-cut that off, because you can cut that when you're finished. I'll fold the batting in half just to find the center. I only need to find the center of the batting on this side. I don't need to find the center of the batting on the other side. So I can just bring that batting up there, and I can pin the batting on the same time that I'm pinning the lining on to the pickup roller. Okay, now I don't have to do anything with this. I'm going to go over to the side again, and we're going to roll it. I don't have to touch the top, it's already prepared. So I'm going to roll the lining, and I just keep rolling it until it won't roll. And I'm going to even let this down a little bit further, like that, because I want this to be close to me here in the front. Okay, now we're going to tuck the batting in, and it simply can be tucked right there on top of the top fabric, like that. Goes in very easily and just falls down freely. You don't have to attach it at the bottom, so it can just fall freely down like that, and will feed up as it comes. Now that we're ready to sew, we're going to move the bars out of the loading position, which is a straight position, into the sewing position. This is very important to remember to do this. Release the lever on the lining, pull the pin out at the end of the bar, and then push the bar out and put your pin back into the hole that's the farthest out on the leg like this. This is the sewing position for the quilting machine. Okay, we're ready to sew our reference line, and we're going to turn our machine on. First turn on your light and then turn on your power. Bring your machine over to about 1 inch from the edge of the canvas. Don't get too close up here next to your canvas. You don't want a chance sewing on your canvas, and you want to have some extra lining and batting there for your binding. So we're going to put our horizontal channel lock on. I have this in single stitch, and I just pushed the button, which went down and brought up my bobbin thread. And then I have it in automatic, so all I have to do is push the button like that and start stitching here. Now I held on to those threads. I didn't need to take a security stitch. So as I come across here like this, so we'll go across like that, turn it off, and we can just pull it off the end like that and cut our threads. Now that gave us a very nice straight line across there. We'll bring our top up to this line, and this first pin will line up with our middle, and then we can take that pin out and just pin underneath. I try to keep my pins out of the way of the top so that I won't have to move them as I'm stitching across here. And I just line the top up with the reference line that I've already stitched. Now, if you have a dog-eared top, in other words, if they have pieced the borders, maybe there's a little extra fullness in those borders, and so that top comes, instead of being square, kind of dog-eared like that, you can lay that up above that line, because if you try to make it conform to a straight line or to pin it to your canvas, then you're going to get even more fullness in the side border. So that's why we have this line, to help us see if that is straight, and we can adjust accordingly. So I'll just put a few pins there. When you're first starting out, you might want to put a few more pins in there just to make sure that everything is going to be held in place as you're stitching across the top. Now I want to stitch on the very edge. I'll go down and bring up my thread again. Hold on to those threads as I start. This time I don't have the channel lock on, because if I come across and I get off the top, then I have to take the lock off and come back. So I just do this freehand, but I want you to notice that I am staying really close to the edge. I'm catching the edge, but I don't even want to come 1/4 inch down, because if I did that, then I would have to unpick those stitches in order to do the binding. So we're securing the top to the lining and batting, but we're making sure that we are not coming down too far to interfere with any binding that we would want to put on. So don't come down more than 1/4 inch, and that has secured the top. Now if you prefer to baste that, then you could certainly do that. I just go ahead and put a good stitch in it. Again, just move it off like that and cut your thread, because that'll save you a lot of time. Now at this point we're ready to move the quilt back and get it in position for the actual quilting. So we'll come around to the side, we'll release our lever here on the top and on the lining, and we will roll our pickup roller until we're about, till the actual top is about a hand width away, or maybe 3 or 4 inches there. Let's make sure that our canvases are nice and straight here. And then we always tighten the lining first. We'll make sure that that's tight, and as soon as you feel some resistance, that's plenty tight. And then on our top, let's straighten it out just a little bit here, like that. And then we can again come down to the end, and we can also tighten it up using our roller. There we go. Now we want to make sure that there's about an even tautness there between the lining and the top. At this point, do come over and check out your quilt and feel the edge and make sure that you don't have any wrinkles or lumps underneath there. In case you did, I want to show you the pivotal access. And in that case, you come over and you release your lining and you'll pull the pin out and you'll be able to turn this entire bar system over like that. And you can roll your top up and you can see how it separates from the batting. At this point you could check underneath here, especially if you had white squares. You'd want to look under there and make sure you didn't have any dark threads that would show under those white squares. And you can lift up your batting and check between the lining and the batting. If you had a white lining or a muslin lining, that you would want to make sure that you haven't got any dark threads again in between there. Make sure that that's all straight. So that pivotal access can be done anytime during the quilting process. Of course, once you've quilted some of it, you're not going to be able to separate that, so be careful in that. And then we can come back down. I like to roll the top down to give it a little bit of leeway there. Pull it back over again into the sewing position on the table. Don't forget that that position needs to be out here when you're actually doing your sewing. And then tighten your lining again and then retighten your top. And now I have nice smooth feel out here on the carriage roller. And I am ready to stitch the left side of my quilt. Now if you prefer to baste, go right ahead. But I'll start right up here like that. And I'm going to sew, and if you want to pin first, if you're more comfortable with a few pins in there, that's perfectly fine. If you have some extra fullness out here on your quilt, if you push down in front of that needle like that, you don't have to get real close to the needle, you can just push down like that. It will actually ease in some of that extra fullness in the quilt, which is nice. And now on this side, if you're going to do a custom quilt, then I take my pins and I will pin about every 5 inches like this, making sure that the head of the pin is outside of the quilt so that if I have any extra fullness that needs to work out of the quilt, I still can have some fullness work through those pins. But if I'm doing a pantograph, which is what I'm going to show you today, then I am going to baste this side. Now the reason that I don't stitch it is because I could still have some fullness that needs to work out through that quilt, and this is the way that we always sew. That's the direction of sewing. So you can come down like this and just baste the side of your quilt. You're basting the top to the lining and the batting. And this is loose enough that it'll be easy to undo if I have extra fullness that needs to work out through the side of that quilt. But I won't have to worry about hitting any clamps or pins. Did you notice that I don't have the clamps on yet? And there's a good reason for that. You don't put your clamps on until you have these sides stabilized. If so, then when you release the clamp, you'll have a bubble in there. So make sure that the clamps are the last thing that you put on just before you begin your stitching. So we're going to put the clamps on the 2 sides, and you don't have to wrap your Velcro around the sides. Believe me, that's going to hold on just fine. If you have any distortion over here, then you need to release that distortion. You don't want to pull your quilt over so that you can actually see a distortion in there. And you can run your hand along the quilt like this, and if you feel any tightness in there, then you've got your clamps on too tight. So be careful with that. I've seen some real disasters with people clamping too tight. So we'll get our clamps on, and now we're ready to set our pattern.